Hello, everyone. John Steinbeck here, your host and producer of the Carl Steinbeck Show. I'm my brother here, and today we haven't sat together and talked for a while, but we're going to talk about the Adelson murder cases updates. But before we get into that, Carl and I have also been following the Sarah Boon case, and yesterday Sarah Boon was convicted. And Carl, give us your thoughts on that, your initial impressions.
Yeah, well, at the outset, I want to say I plan on covering the case with nightly recaps, but I did not have that on my bandwidth to be able to do that. And so I apologize for not covering that. But I will say that this was with a quick verdict for the full charge of second-degree murder. Keep in mind, she was offered a 15-year manslaughter deal. And so she turned that down to go full trial mode. And I thought it was interesting the fact that it was able to be established, including by the state's expert, that she did have this battery syndrome from domestic battery spouse syndrome. And so what happened was she basically had this as a defense to her reacting not the right way. So I thought that's why I also thought that there was a chance she could get something less than second degree. But as it turns out, the jury came back pretty quick with second degree murder charged against her. And what happened was, I didn't think the prosecution was that convincing in their closing, and they brought up a lot of examples of things I didn't think were applicable. They kept on referring to the suitcase as a box many times during the presentation. Defense counsel, on the other hand, I thought they had, for the attorney having short prep time on this thing, I thought he did a really bang-up job. I don't know how much lead work was done by the other attorneys, the other up to a dozen attorneys that were on this case beforehand, but I thought he did a really good job. I thought he had good presentation. I thought he did a lot of twisting of the jury instructions. He kept on using the word certainty, and that is not something that was anywhere written in the jury instructions. So he kept on interjecting that word and term, which raised, I thought, the burden of proof for the state. And the state never objected, which I thought was interesting. So anyway, just some gamesmanship going on there with the defense. And in the end, I thought, she had a totally effective defense. And in the end, the jury found her guilty of second-degree murder, and so yeah, she's really made decisions to her detriment.
All right, we'll jump now, Carl, to what most people are here for, which is Donald Adelson has new counsel, Josh Zellman, and a former judge, Jackie Fulford. What's your initial impressions, Carl?
I've not heard these names come up before at all. They're in Tallahassee, but they're both local to the area there, and they've been around for many years. In fact, Zellman, I see he's originally from Miami, so maybe he has some personal connection with Donna there. And I can tell you, though, as soon as I saw two attorneys were retained and made an appearance on this case, they also demanded jury trial, which is standard for any attorney making an appearance. You always want to preserve that as a new counsel coming on a case. But automatically, by having two attorneys on the case, I think it's much less likely that Donna has any indications of wanting to cut a plea, as we heard from Alex Morris, that maybe there's some plea bargain in the works, something like that. I just think that makes it much more unlikely that Donna's going to hire two lawyers to work a plea agreement. So I think it means that they're going to go toe-to-toe, and we're going to see a full knockdown, drag-out trial here. And who knows if they're going to be ready within the next 6 months, or it's going to take a year and a half for them to prep. But it's sort of interesting also why they went with two attorneys as well, why they couldn't just do it with one, because there's not a lot to present at all for defense on this case. It's pretty much a slam dunk win against Donna. And so with that being the case, I guess the good thing is they're burning through a lot more cash trying to come up with a defense. And as well as Charlie, if he gets any post-conviction relief, that, they're going to burn through more and more, many hundreds of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees. So that's the one of the bright sides of it. If there's any hiccups in the prosecution of these two cases against these Adelsons.
Now, Carl, Judge Stephen Everett down in Tallahassee came out a few days ago with an order, which seemed pretty interesting to me. Is that normal for a judge to issue on his or her own to new counsel instructions?
Well, I've never seen that before, and I think what that's driving at is I think Judge Everett is absolutely livid over the fact that this whole thing with the conflict of interest duped him and the state attorney's office. And I think he's just beside himself of how this thing could have gotten derailed with Donna. And now he's looking at a possible reversal of the conviction for Charlie. So basically, if Charlie's case gets reversed, they're back to square one. And so while those two Adelsons are in jail, if you start out at ground zero and have to go all over again to prosecute Charlie and Donna, I mean, just think of the frustration the judge must be feeling that he's not moved the football at all to get these cases closed out.
Let's talk about the appellate attorney Upperman, Carl. Can you explain why he would file the motion that he did to relinquish jurisdiction?
Yeah, I think this was a move to basically avoid further delays in the court appellate process. And most importantly, keep in mind here in America, the Court of Appeals for any state or federal system, they only have the record that was developed at the trial level. So any new information, any new details cannot be interjected in the appellate briefs that the appellate attorneys like Upperman would give to the court. They can make arguments on inferences and deductions that are reasonable, but they cannot create new facts and introduce them in the record for the large part in any kind of appellate brief. So what this is actually doing is allowing the appellate court to just kick it back to the trial court and say, you develop the fact details that are necessary for this. If you look back at what I said initially when this was, Donna was on the case in court with Rash Bomb first appearing, I said the court did not properly screen this and filter this. They didn't ask Donna enough questions. They didn't explain to her the scenarios and the traps that basically could hamstring this thing. And I mean, if a defendant wants to just clog up the court system, have all these conflicted issues with their attorney while they're still in pretrial confinement, then I guess that's a win for Donna. Most defendants don't like it in pretrial confinement and they want to get stuff moved along and they don't want the case dragging for years on end while they're still in pretrial. Think about it for Katie McBanois. I mean, she spent many, many years awaiting trial, and then she had a mistrial, and then went back again to prosecute her. So you can, have defendants spend a lot of time waiting trials because of different issues that come up in the case. So in this particular one, this is really self-inflicted by Rash Bomb. Donna probably didn't know about it. I still am skeptical that Rash Bomb was even trying to set this up. I just don't think these attorneys in that courtroom in Leon County Jail, and granted, Rash Bomb's from Miami, I don't think they really understand the nuances and straightforward requirements in the Constitution that's found in the case law for the constitutional right to conflict-free counsel in representing defendants, both indigent and those that are retaining their own counsel.
Now, in response to that, Carl, the state filed a response. Can you talk about that a little
bit? Right. The state, I'm not going to go for it line by line, but in essence, what I gathered from that and from my memory here, looking at it briefly earlier tonight, was basically that the state is opposing the request to relinquish the jurisdiction back to the trial court. And in doing so, I think that they're like a lot of prosecution offices and appellate offices for the state prosecutors, which is they want to resist anything and everything that defense counsel asks for and appellate counsel asks for. And in doing so, a lot of times they do it to their own detriment. So if they're resisting this, and let's just say the Court of Appeals does not grant Upperman's motion, so in other words, the jurisdiction is still retained at the Court of Appeals, what that's doing is basically just bogging down the timeline of when this appellate process is going to be final. And what it's also doing is preventing the court from having the right information to make the right decision. So in essence, the state attorney's office representation at the appellate level is actually making this thing going to drag out even longer, because if this thing is going to be further appealed because the trial court didn't make a quick decision, because this, like I said in a previous live stream, this could be sent back within a month or so down to the trial court to have Judge Everett do a fact-finding process, really run the wickets on this thing and find out how convoluted of a mess of a conflict was Rash Bomb. And Rash Bomb is up to his eyeballs, drowning in all this conflict issue. And in the end, I think that's pretty clear to me that Judge Everett would find Rash Bomb was conflicted to the extent that Charlie never got a fair shot, and by doing so, he's going to grant him a new trial. And then, the state attorney's office at that time would probably decide to go ahead and appeal that as well. So I think we're going to see anytime there's something that's favorable to the defense, the state is going to appeal on it, even though the most likely effect, in my opinion, is that it's going to be busted on appeal, and they're going to have to retry the thing. So I would invite the fact-finding process by the defense motion. I would entertain that and go ahead and just get this fact-finding underway and have some closure, at least of the facts that are developed at the trial level, so the appellate court can have the proper decision before them. Because if they don't have enough facts, guess what they're going to do? They're going to do, in essence, the same thing that Upperman is asking for, which is send it back to Judge Everett, and he's got to do a whole bunch of fact-finding to see what was all around this issue with conflicted counsel representation by Rash Bomb. It's really an issue where the attorney and the court and the state attorney's office, they failed to police this thing up. It was something that was, I would say, a ticking time bomb, and you never know when a conflict is going to raise its ugly head. And sure enough, it did in Donna's case. They just sort of like didn't worry about it at all with Charlie's, but the state attorney's office knew that Donna had been represented in, although not in court, there's ongoing long-term years, many years of Rash Bomb developing a close relationship with Donna. And in essence, you know, the question is going to be, who was he more loyal to? Was he more loyal to Donna, or was he more loyal to Charlie? And that's going to be something that the courts of appeals are just going to look at that and go, you know what? He is so wrapped around these two different cases. They could have diametrically opposed positions that you need to take. Charlie could look more guilty in some ways in the case than Donna. Donna could be looked at as more guilty in other areas of the case that Charlie's not. So trying to slice and dice that as a defense attorney is really an impossible job. And if you can't properly represent somebody, as I've said, it's so clear to me that Rash Bomb would have never even discussed a plea agreement with Charlie, because that automatically would mean the state would expect him to flip on Donna. And so right there, you got him nailed on a constitutional violation. So that's why I don't think there's any hope for this thing to survive on appeal. The conviction I'm talking about.
Now, Attorney Upperman had a response to what the state said.
Right. And he basically said that procedurally, the state was saying procedurally, this wasn't a proper venue to do this. But he did cite some other case law that showed that this was something to be, like I say, a fact-finding process. So you get the right facts before the court. So the court doesn't want to make a decision if they don't have those kind of details on the record. For example, if they look at the trial transcripts for Charlie's trial, how much of an in-depth inquiry was there into this conflict? And that's one of the things I was complaining about. It's like they just basically ran through and asked 7 questions of Donna, and all the questions were yes, 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 yes. Well, how does that show she even knows what she was being represented on that, right? So that was for Donna's, but for Charlie's, there was no inquiry at all. So in Charlie's case, for example, there was not a single inquiry on, okay, Rash Bomb, we know, state attorney's office just said this to the court, because obviously Judge Everett didn't know probably that Rash Bomb was representing Donna for many years. So the state attorney's office sort of interjected and said, hey, look, wait a minute, Your Honor, we got a problem here in case there's, we do plan on charging Donna down the road. And we foresee a big conflict in the dual representation of both these Adelsons. So, and then the issue could have been fully litigated, but state's attorney's office prosecutors just sat on their hands, didn't raise the issue. And so that's why this whole thing is now, as I said, once Donna's case was coming off the rails here with this conflict, I said, this is going to be the number 1 issue that Upperman is going to raise on appeal. And sure enough, this is what's happening. And so I just think that anybody that's trying to say that this thing is, survivable and salvageable, I think in the end, they're going to be proven incorrect.
Carl, here's a question that a lot of us non-lawyers have. So I want to address it real quick with you, or have you address it with us, please. Clarify what you mean by what other people mean when they talk about reversible error.
Well, that's a term I use because that's something that in criminal law, especially, it's used as something that means that an error is so significant that when it goes up for an appeal, the case is going to get overturned. So that's what I mean by reversible error. In other words, the error was of such a magnitude that the Court of Appeals will send the case back down and bust it open, say the conviction's tossed. And so that's why I also use the term, overturn the conviction. That's another way of saying that. So reversible error is definitely something that you want to avoid as a prosecutor. you want the Court of Appeals to always affirm the conviction and not find this reversible error, which basically means you got to start over from scratch. So that's what I expect to happen with Charlie's situation, is that in the end, no matter what level, even if Judge Everetts, let's say, finds that there wasn't, denial of a constitutional right for Charlie, which Rash Bomb's representation, I think in the end, even if it has to go up to Supreme Court, or even let's just say it goes to a federal court later on some kind of collateral attack through the appeals process that Charlie would still be pursuing, I think it's going to come back where he's going to be granted a new trial. So that's what's really sad to see, that this thing is just going to continue lingering for years, all because this was not properly examined and rooted out in the beginning, this massive conflict with Rash Bomb.
In a few minutes, we're going to take your questions for Carl. So if you want to cue those up now, please. If you can, use the emoji question marks, 3 red ones. If you can't, that's fine too, to let us know that it's a question for Carl versus a chat amongst yourselves. So last topic I want to talk to you, Carl, is about when I first got on this case. It was just really surprising me on how slow everything was going. And I remember being kind of an outlier in a Facebook group saying, what it's taken the state to go after the rest of these Adelsons. And here we are, years later, you got on the case. In fact, one of the reasons or probably the main reason Carl's on this case, when I started talking to him about it, was just how long things were taking. So Carl, my question for you is, you're the only attorney I'm aware of that was also aggravated by how long this was taken. And here we are. How do these developments today affect your longstanding opinion of this one conviction at a time approach by the state?
Yeah, and the key term is conviction. If you wait till one conviction of a massive conspiracy ring is busted and convicted, I just think it's really an abysmal way to get justice for the victims. And in this particular case, I guess I'd equate it to, and I use the term like either a joint trial or fast, rapid succession charging. So it doesn't have to be a wait until the conviction of one Adelson before you moved on to the next. That is such a backwards way of looking at proper execution of justice in my mind, and you don't force the defendants to turn on themselves. So I think there's just many things that are going to wind up hurting you in the end. And then if you do have an appellate issue like this, guess what? It's like things are like with Charlie could take years more. So if you have a year and a half to get this appeal process vetted, it could go up to Supreme Court maybe another 3-4 years, let's say. And then you could also go to the federal system. And so, I mean, you could be talking 5-6 years down the road, hypothetically, give or take, where you get this case busted and then you got to start all over. So what's that doing for the victims? Nothing but clogging up the system, denying them a sense of closure for the folks that are responsible for this heinous murder. So I do think that the timeline also, if they did it in quick succession, these charging of these Adelsons, it would have happened, should have been happening many years ago. And the fact that they're still not arresting Wendy and Harvey is a sign that they're still too timid to do the right thing. So in the end, I think I think everybody's gonna see what I've been complaining about, which is you do get some minuscule tidbits of information if you wait to charge one and slow roll the case like that. But you also have some diminishing returns that could happen. And the fact is certain evidence can become unavailable, for example. So there's a fine line between too quick and too slow. So in this particular case, having the slow roll prosecutions take that long, and then they're just starting out with Donna right now. They've wasted 11 months waiting to go to trial for Donna, and now they're starting all over. And we got our first hearing with the new counsel not until the 10th of December. So again, it's going to be a year she spent in jail with no forward progress to get a conviction.
Carl and I were talking earlier, and he brought up this airport analogy. And since I'm a pilot, I thought it was a really good one. Carl, can you explain to our viewers what you told me?
Well, with you being a 747 captain among other large international aircraft, I said, John, I equate it to this. Imagine if you're at DFW Airport and the air traffic controllers told you your plane cannot leave the gate until until the other planes have all taken off. In fact, we're not going to allow any planes on the taxiway until one at a time is taken off and has a certain height clearance. So imagine how that would backlog the airport system. I mean, basically shut it down, right? So that's how I look at this. It's so slow, it's so ineffective, and could it be possibly safer to not have some airplanes be that close on the taxiway? Oh, sure, but in the end, your efficiencies are totally gutted, and it makes no sense for justice. So the justice to all the passengers and the crew like yourself would be, a huge, massive burden. So that's why I sort of look at it as this, wait till one is convicted before we pursue the other one. And it's really looking, you better have, even if you have a clean kill, and let's say Charlie's not, case isn't overturned, you still have this inordinate delay. And there is a big appellate issue, and I guarantee you, if the state attorney's office is not scared about this, then they're really checked out. So they should take this thing very seriously. And based on their appellate brief, I was not impressed with their appellate brief. They basically don't look like they're taking this serious enough on paper, and some of their conclusions and the way they wrote it up the brief, I was not that impressed with it. And I think Upperman's motion is going to be granted by the court here. And hopefully it won't take more than a couple months so we can see expedited justice for the Merkels on this one issue about conflicted counsel.
Yeah, I like the airport analogy. I mean, it's inefficient, and it's a waste of people's time. It'll tick off the passengers, the packages if you're flying cargo, and it just seems like not a smart way to run things. So I like that airport analogy. So Carl, we're going to now jump into some of the questions.
Sure.
First one is from Mary Patterson. Carl, if Charlie Adelson gets a new trial, can he change his defense strategy?
Well, he's pretty much locked in. They already have him under sworn testimony. So if he tries to come up with something different, a different reason, I mean, they got him locked in. So he's dead to rights and come up with anything new. So no, he's got the same failed defense. That's you won't find something more ridiculous, as I've said. It was absolutely outrageously laughable.
Beatrice Lee says, this case is hopeless. The longer it takes, the more corrupted it becomes.
Yeah, I mean, it's really appalling how we got a real case, and you couldn't fumble and stumble and bumble through this like the Leon County system has shown itself to be, and they're still not out of the woods yet. They still don't get it. And it's really amazing that this is happening right there in the capital city of Florida. Florida, one of the biggest, most traveled cities, states in the nation. And there at the Capitol, they have this inept kind of prosecution going on.
I mean, Carl, at the rate they're going, the Markel boys could be college graduates by the time justice is finally meted out to all the guilty Adelsons.
Well, they're about 14 and 15 now. So, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about 5 or 6 years potentially, yeah, that could very well be the case. And so it's just a crying shame that this thing is just slinking along. And like I say, it's more constitutional issues are gonna rear its head here in Charlie's case. So we'll see how it plays out.
Chantel says, Carl, do you think there is now a chance that Wendy will never get arrested? It's infuriating, I know, but at this point, maybe it's time to be realistic. I don't trust the state anymore.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of loss of confidence for a lot of people, that they have this loss of confidence. But I think that the state has to realize that the pressure is only going to continue to mount. The spotlight's going to continue to be on them, that they haven't handled this the right way, that justice has been denied to the Markel family in such a significant way. And so I think that as much as we may think that the state attorney's office is just trying to hunker down, to throw their hands up, I think that the public scrutiny that's out there on this case is not going to let them off the hook, and I think they're going to have to keep on answering for it. And right now, if you stop to think about it, Jack Campbell's biggest legacy is this case, and he's failed to deliver in a proper fashion, and especially going to be the case if Charlie's convictions overturned. So right now, the botch thing with Donna is under his belt, and if Charlie stands convicted, that's great for his legacy. But if Charlie gets his case get overturned, this is going to be such a huge mark. So I think that, if you look at the optics of it, I think he needs to do the right thing. And if you look at all the public demands for this case, other Adelsons need to be arrested to make sure there's actual justice going on down there in Leon County. So it remains to be seen, but I'm not gonna throw in the towel and think that this setback and their lack of skill and knowledge on constitutional requirements is going to completely let Wendy off the hook. No, I just don't see that, but I can see why you're wondering that.
Stevie Howell says, Carl, are all prior rulings by the judge formally vacated? I find this confusing.
Well, if you have conflicted counsel in Rash Bomb for Donna's case, then basically everything he filed, you have to look at it that it was tainted and corrupted. And so I think in the end, the new counsel will file a lot of the same stuff. They'll try to be creative and come up with something different because they already know how the judge ruled, but it's the same kind of evidence the state wants to admit. So I think in the end, it's going to be the same outcome. I just think it's going to, take a lot of time and expense. And in the end, I mean, these attorneys are going to be charging big bucks for Donna. So like I say, that's one thing I like to see if guilty parties have to churn through all that money and burn it up on rehashing and relitigating stuff if there's something that's thrown out. So that's probably the only silver lining in any of this. But in the end, I think that Donna's going to be convicted just as quick as Charlie. So it doesn't matter who her lawyers are. This is not a winnable case.
All right. Next question is from Lulu22. Would there be a possibility for the state to try Charlie and Donna together if Charlie wins on appeal?
Well, I think it depends on the timeline of when Charlie's case gets flushed out of the system and what rulings are going to take effect and how much the state's going to try to appeal it. So I think if the state keeps fighting on this issue of whether Charlie's has a right to a new trial or not, I think the odds of that happening are virtually slim. And so therefore, I don't think there'd be a joint trial. I think in the beginning, that would have been a good thing to have a joint trial, unless it's objected to by the defense, and then that would be up to the judge to decide if the defenses are too much a denial of due process. So in the end, though, I would push for that, or at least have them, like I say, in rapid succession. So remains to be seen.
Watercolor Mama asks, what is it about Donna Adelson that every choice she makes is tangled with questionable characters? Are these two new attorneys squeaky clean, or is the former judge a potential problem in the future?
Well, you're talking about Fulford having potential problems. I know she was a trial court judge there in the area, Leon County, Tallahassee, and she was forcibly made to retire. I believe it was for medical reasons, but there was also some ethical inquiries that were being done at the time. So in the end, she's still a licensed attorney to practice law there. So I heard that she had been the presiding judge over the estate for Dan Markell. I just found that very cringy and very much in bad taste to be a judge and then go on and represent an accused murderer. And when you, as a judge, were having the estate settled in your court, she may not met anybody. I'm sure she probably doesn't even remember the name Markell from the estate being tied to many other cases you had. But because it was a noteworthy murder in the case, maybe she does as well. But in the end, I just thought it was bad taste. There's nothing that I found in judicial canons that the judges have for ethical rules that would prevent her from taking on the case. I just think it's in bad taste professionally, and I think it reflects bad on the profession, and that's why I don't like it.
Chip asked, Carl, why aren't attorneys paid based on outcome?
Well, they don't do that in criminal law settings. Obviously, in personal injury type settings, the attorneys take a third or more based on what they recover. And so in criminal law outcomes, you cannot guarantee in a criminal law setting, ethically guarantee a particular outcome. And so it's either by an hour or flat fee, but it's not by whether you win or lose. And it's just always been that way. So that's a good question. But, you don't want to. I think that'd probably be a bad thing if you could charge a lot more if you win the case. I think the diligence and drive to assist your client should be there, regardless of the rate. You should still fight the same. If that's what you agree to, then you should fight just as hard without having some kind of windfall win at the end. And a lot of the defendants don't have that kind of money anyway in the criminal law arena. So you're talking about Adelson's being an outlier. Those are the kind of folks you really don't see much in the criminal law system.
Teresa asks, do you think we supporters of the Markel family should keep the pressure on Jack Campbell's office? Thanks.
Well, I don't think I'm not asking you guys to call him up and dial him up and hound him. I know some people sent me messages that said they have, and somebody gave me a feedback, and the message was not kindly taken by the state attorney's office. So, in the end, I think this filing channels like this that are covering the case is a way to put up pressure on the office, and I'll just say again that the way the state's attorney's office handled the ruling by Judge Everett to kick off all Adelson lawyers, all Donna Adelson lawyers from the case was such a huge blow, and they just act like this wasn't a big deal. They had no culpability in this thing, and so anyway, that they have other cases to worry about. So it was a slap in the face to the Markels and all the wonderful supporters of the Justice for the Markel cause.
Ann Bradley asks, do you feel like giving up on this, Carl?
No, I'm still covering this case, and I think it's somewhat a gut shot to see this kind of stuff from whenever I got on this case a year and a half ago. I've seen the problems with the prosecution. I've tried to be pro prosecution in this case. Of course, I want to see the best outcomes. I want the state attorney's office to do well, but one of the reasons I got on this case, and probably the main reason that I agreed to do this channel, was having to do with the fact that the boys were denied the visitation by the Markel family. I thought that was the ultimate extreme cruelty, that their father's murdered and they have to basically be cut off from the family tree. That was such an outrage. So that's something that also bothers me, that the state attorney's office approach doesn't take into account the suffering children being denied visitation from the and having a relationship even with Phil and Ruth and Shelley and all the other the family members up there in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, Wendy could have called up the Markels in Canada at any time and said, look, summer's rapidly approaching. Do you guys want to take the boys for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, for a month? Or you tell us when you want the boys, we'll send them up. But to our knowledge, Carl, it never happened. Remember, there was a 6-year period of time where the Markels of Canada were not able to see the boys at all. And remember on the stand when Wendy was not truthful about that, and Georgia called in agent Pat Sanford to correct her misleading statement that, what did she say? Something like unfettered access or something like that to the boys, which we knew was not the case.
Right. Well, keep in mind also that the boys have never seen their father's grave up in Canada. So those of you who knew the channel haven't followed this case on other media. That's something that's really shocking. They're 14, 15 years old. Also, I understand, I should stand corrected. I'm getting better intel that's telling me that Wendy is in fact in Austin. So apparently Harvey's not there. He's still living alone now in Miami. So think about that for the backblast on what's happened with this murder. Professor Markel, all to have a family clan down there in the Miami South Beach area. And now Harvey's the only one left standing down there. So it's really a tale of, stuff coming back to bite him. And, he's probably not being able to go to Texas that much either to see the boys. So it's really a tragedy for the boys. They could have had, loving, supporting family, honorable people doing the right thing and teach them how to be productive citizens. And I'm sure they're going to, learn a lot of hardship of what the Markels suffered eventually. But it doesn't appear that anyone's trying to foster that connection on the Wendy side of the house. So it's just very much a wicked tragedy to see this thing. And how the boys are suffering unknowingly, probably to a large extent, but of course, we see how the Markells are suffering, those in Canada.
Carl, Wendy's a lawyer. What's keeping her? Is there a rule or procedure that's keeping her from visiting Donna in jail right now?
No, she's even if she didn't ever practice a criminal case before, has zero experience, and there's nothing that does prevent her from going to see her mom Donna there in Lincoln County Jail. And I think Wendy realizes that the more she hangs around the family, I think the more she feels like they're going to say something that's going to be incriminating to her, that they can't keep their mouth shut, both Charlie and Donna. And so that's why I think she just wants to basically start a new life, and she's basically just cut them off completely. And obviously Donna's got to be completely livid about that.
And I'm sure Wendy's just saying to Donna, if she's talked to her at all, that my lawyer told me not to speak to anybody about this case. So just extending it now to Donna as well. So next question. Wendy Adelson can restore Ruth and Phil's relationship with children any day of the week. That she continues this and so is so ugly. That's just perfect segue into this statement.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that kind of cruelty is out there.
From LJ, Carl, aside from the conflict issue, do you agree new attorney, former judge pros might be competent enough to knock some corporate cooperation sense into Donna and no way a trial ends well?
Well, it goes back to what, thanks LJ, and it goes back to what I've said a couple different times on channel, which is the wealthier the client, the less likely they're going to get straightforward answers from their attorney. And if you hire two attorneys, you're less likely to want to plead guilty, because think about it. If they charge $1.5 million collectively or $2 million collectively to represent Donna, if they start talking a plea agreement in the next month or two, the most likely outcome is going to be Donna's going to say, I'm not paying you $2 million to just cut a deal that you basically spent 5 or 10 hours on. So I think you got the money aspect that drags cases out, because otherwise the attorney's not going to earn their fee. And in the end, it's a business that they have to run as attorneys, and the business decisions can a lot of time get in the way of the actual best interest of the client. So that's what I see as a general nutshell of how things work. So I them to bring forward any kind of aggressive approach with Donna to try to get her to flip and plead guilty.
Here's just a nice comment, Carl, from Cheryl Crawford. This is so sad for the Markel family. My heart, they've been through so much pain. Justice for Dan.
Yeah, there's you guys have had a lot of great support on the channel, so that's encouraging to see. And I'm sure the Markells that watch are also very much grateful and appreciative.
Very much so. Carl, here's a very interesting question. Whom do you think of all the Adelsons, who has the most regrets about the murder of Dan Markel?
Well, you're assuming there's any regrets there. I don't think there's probably any regrets at this point. I think that there's mostly probably anger directed towards Wendy by Charlie and also by Donna. Donna, I think, is angry because think about what she said. They've done so much to protect Wendy to the extent that they're now, she's been in jail a year and Charlie's been in jail over a year and a half / prison. And what do they got to show for it? It was all for Wendy's sake. And now their lives are ruined, and they're never gonna escape being a convicted murderer. So no matter how these appellate issues get fleshed out, in the end, they'll be convicted murderers, unless, let's say, Donna dies while it's on appeal, then the conviction could be vacated that way. But short of that, they're never going to see the light of day.
Kate Gray asks, if the children become adults during this process, which I predict will happen, can they be called to give evidence now that they're adults at that point?
Well, they could even be called as witnesses as minors. There's no rule prohibiting that. I've seen that many times in criminal proceedings where you have minors that testify. It's a little bit more complex and less reliable to have children as witnesses there, but it does happen. And so could they want to be involved in this case? I just don't think the state attorney's office, who's gone into enough detail on the case, is going to think of calling those witnesses. And I think that, they got enough there anyway. So I probably would, at least interview him, but not try to call him as a witness unless they had some kind of smoking gun against Wendy or one of these other Adelsons. Then I would not call them.
Jill Argos says, it's just a comment, Carl, the Adelson boys will never turn on their mother or family, brainwashed.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that's very common. And John and I have seen that before too. So
yeah, I agree with that. J Bones says, in my opinion, no matter how many times you try Charlie, the state's evidence is huge. Plus, who's going to believe Charlie's story ever?
Right. It's not gonna ever. You're not going to find a single juror that's going to believe Charlie's story. So it's not going to be a hung jury. It's going to be a slam dunk conviction.
Leslie asks, do you know if Harvey has been visiting Donna?
I don't know about that. And frankly, I assume there's some of that going on, but I'm trying to avoid really most of that personal connection stuff, other than the fact that where they living, and the fact is, the Markell Act does not apply in Texas like it does in Florida. So if there's an issue of Wendy being arrested and convicted, then the visitation for the Markells and that act are basically meaningless because that law does not apply in Texas.
And Christine asks, what if Charlie claims that Rash Bomb told him to go along with the defense theory, but that it wasn't true, that he was manipulated by Rash Bomb?
Well, I mean, attorneys, if he's trying to say that Rash Bomb cooked up this story and all that kind of stuff, I mean, obviously, that's directly implicating the lawyer as a complete, making a complete fraud upon the court, subject to disbarment, all that kind of stuff. So I think that that's not going to pan out, and I think that Charlie had his own story of what was going on. He had plenty of time to think about it, and he had years in the works to come up with a story, and it was so far-fetched and crazy. I mean, nobody would believe it. I mean, nobody would believe if he created a movie about this Charlie's defense, stuff like that. I mean, nobody would believe it. So, and then he's trying to project that as a real-life scenario that happened to him. Granted, truth can be stranger than fiction, but his truth that he's describing is so outside the realm of possibilities. It's utterly something that I can't believe a Rash Bomb would even argue that in court. It's that embarrassing as an attorney to argue.
Well, and remember, Carl, during Charlie's long day of testimony, by about 1 o'clock, half the court or 3/4 of the courtroom was cleared out.
Yeah,
I left a bunch of people that just was so monotonous, on and on and on. It was so ridiculous. I mean, who leaves, halfway through someone's testimony, important testimony, but it was so farcical, so ridiculous that we just got up and left.
Yeah, I wasn't there, but yeah, I saw that, and I remember you telling me about that. So that's how much of a loser cases was. And yet, think about it, Charlie, he still thought he had won the case. He thought he's going home. He gave his belongings away to the other inmates, and Charlie never even noticed that all these people cleared out of the courtroom because they were so nauseated with his completely asinine story.
Blair is saying this is a common question. Why is Wendy Adelson still free as the main beneficiary of their murder?
Right. I mean, basically, it comes down to Jack Campbell. That's what it comes down to. It's not the evidence. It's Jack Campbell.
Sally Birch asks, what will it take to get this case off the ground? Will someone from somewhere else have to come in and shake things up? It's such an embarrassment.
Right. I mean, I don't understand why this is still allowed to take place, but all I can say is keep on following coverage of this case, and we can't let him off the hook, and basically just fade away and let Jack Campbell cease to do the right thing.
So Sally says, priceless was Carl's reaction to Rash Bomb's opening, going to miss that pro trial. So Carl, the next opening, our plan right now is to, of course, cover that as well. So look forward to seeing you cover the opening of Charlie's. And you're saying basically he's got to come. He can't come up with a new defense. He's wedded to his old farcical, crazy story. So do you have a little empathy for that lawyer that's that basically attached to that?
Yeah. Well, let's just first wait to see what the Court of Appeals does, and I really think that they're gonna reverse his conviction. So I hope I'm wrong, but I'm really I feel strongly about it that I think that's they'll wind up doing. It just looks so bad what Rash Bomb did. So anybody looking at this from the outside, any attorney that does or doesn't have any experience in criminal law, I think if you look at it, it just looks like you just scratch your head going, how did this happen and how did nobody prevent it? So anyway, like I say, Judge Everett, he's really burned by this, and that's why he's telling these new attorneys, you got to prove that you don't have a conflict, because he doesn't want to have another case with Donna blow up in his face.
This ties in perfectly to this next question. I'm worried about the new judge slash attorney being another issue for Donna. So could that be the reason why Judge Everett's created that order to begin with?
I think he probably was going to do that anyway, but the fact that the judge was tied in with this case as a judge for the Markells, the optics of it just looks so bad, and the judge's hands may be tied, but it just really looks bad to the Markells. It looks bad for Leon County and the area there in Florida. It just does not leave you with a good feeling that there isn't a lot of crazy stuff going on in Leon County Jail that cannot be explained and you don't see elsewhere on a regular basis like that.
Kelly Tucker asks, is it conceivable that the state doesn't feel as much pressure to get justice for the Markells because they're Canadian and not American citizens?
I do think that's the case. I think that, Dan wasn't a local to there. The Markells are not somebody that they have to, as I mentioned before, they have to somebody that Jack Campbell is going to run to in the public setting. So if they're in another country, they're just not they're not getting the proper focus and what kind of network of friends and family does Dan still have there that can put that kind of pressure on the state attorney's office? So I just I don't know. I mean, I don't see anybody complaining about anything that's going on, including this botched issue with the conflict of counsel. So I think if we're not outspoken, then it's only going to continue to remain in this quagmire.
Patricia asks, or says, I think that Magbanwa has still not revealed everything she knows about the murder. Do you think that the state will call her?
Yeah, I think they got to have her on standby, just like they were planning on doing for Donna. I think they'll call her in Donna's case, and as well as Charlie's case if he gets a retrial. So she did provide material information. I think some of the stuff having to do with the money drop in her relationship with Charlie, and I think the fact that Charlie does not pursue not married, but women with children. I think it shows that she was set up to be the tool used to help commit the murders, just like Jeff Lacasse was the one that was used by Wendy to also be a suspect and possible co-conspirator for this case as well. So they're working both those. Wendy and Charlie are working both these to set people up as patsies.
Do those who are already incarcerated dislike being called to testify again, or is it a welcome break in their prison routine?
Oh, well, I would say most people don't like testifying, and I would say maybe the Luis Rivera. I thought the way he did the stare down on Charlie, I thought maybe he got some pleasure out of that. But if you got some kind of revenge factor involved there, but I think a lot of witnesses prefer to stay out of the limelight, especially if they're going to be on live stream coverage for the world to see.
Nancy asks, is there a fund for the Markell family to help cover their costs of traveling back and forth? I wouldn't mind pitching in.
Yeah, I would say that, there's some kind of victim assistance funds, but for different states, but I'm not tracking whether that's available for the Markells or not.
M. Christine asks, if Charlie is eventually retried, and there's a mistrial or, God forbid, an acquittal, would they still proceed with holding a trial for Donna?
Yeah, I mean, that's not going to happen. He's not going to get acquitted, and there's not going to be a hung jury. But let's say for extreme hypotheticals' sake, that's something that should not prevent the further prosecution of Donna. But who knows? Who knows? Depends what kind of backbone this office has at the state attorney's office there.
Jenny asks, who do you think is the best witness to incriminate Wendy? Is it Wendy herself, given her questionable behavior? I feel Jeff Lacasse is a good witness to link Wendy to the crime.
Yeah, Jeff Lacasse, he's dynamite. He's the one that's really stands out as like a big hero in this case. And so I would say Jeff Lacasse is, he pretty much had this case figured out. Not instantly, but he was very troubled by a lot of stuff, and he put it all together within I would say 7-8 months of the case, when he really went back through and looked at all. And he went back to the Tallahassee Police Department 2 more times after his initial interview to really set the scene on, hey, this is what was really going on. And he basically, as he said, had a spell cast over him because he was so sucked into this thing. But again, just like Katie McBanois, he was never a legitimate love interest for Wendy. You could just see the way he was used to be the fall guy.
Joe Running Dog Productions, would you like to cross-examine Charlie? Which 3 main points would you ask about?
Well, that's there's so many things that you could ask Charlie about that it's like something that Charlie has a quick answer for. The thing that Georgia didn't try to nail him on was different things like this TV code for murder, and he was able to tap dance around that. And I don't know if I said Wendy, I meant to say Georgia. Georgia in her questioning of Charlie, just didn't do a real deep dive follow through on that. Now that was like, if you'd ask him a few of those questions on things like that, and it would have made his story really seem laughable, because Charlie actually left the stand thinking he'd basically schooled Georgia, right? And a good cross-examiner is going to basically nail them down in so many details that even Charlie, with his glib flim-flam story, would have realized that he's caught in a number of different things. So that the TV code thing is just one of the many different things that they could have brought out, and just focus in on those kind of things. And anyway, it's something that in the end, though, Charlie out because his testimony was just so ludicrous. So you could have basically not even cross-examined Charlie. His story was so preposterous. So it doesn't really matter if Georgia laid a glove on him or not.
Steve Howell asks, what are your thoughts on Sigfredo? Is his silence just to do with the prison gang culture?
He's one of the really strange ones that I cannot figure out why he's so defiant, didn't want to cooperate. And look at how it blew up in his face, his decisions. Look how Katie's blew up in her face. She could have walked out of there pretty much scot-free if she just cooperated. And in the end, both of them are serving life without parole. And it just really makes you wonder what kind of conversation happened between the lawyers and the clients to have them make such terrible decisions.
Well, the criminal that got the best deal was Luis Rivera, and he paid how much? Nothing, because he had a court-appointed defense attorney, didn't he?
Right.
And he got the best. Would you agree? He got the best.
He's
representation.
He's gonna basically be out of there within. He's gonna start serving a state sentence within a few years, and that's the other thing, is he'll probably be done serving a sentence by the time they get this case wrapped up. So it's really astounding that there's not a strong chorus of folks demanding that the prosecution pursue these other arrests and convictions in a speedy manner.
Tiffany asks, I don't feel sorry for Katie, but how in the world is it not ineffective assistance of counsel for her?
Well, as an attorney, if you're sitting there and you're talking to a client and you don't have any tough conversations with them, what their likely outcome is, and you can have a lot of bad things happen to your client. So it comes down to, ultimately, it's the client's call, but how much pressure and leverage does the attorney do to advise her that this is such a bad decision? So some attorneys, like if Rash Bomb never confronted Charlie about his story being totally preposterous and unbelievable, and he could guarantee a conviction. Like if I had a client come in my office and tell me a story like Charlie's, I would sit him down and say, listen, there's nobody in the world that's going to believe your story, okay? And if you think you want a lawyer you can outsmart, then go down the street and find somebody else. So, you just basically sell the client on your experience and your interest in helping them get the best deal possible when the evidence is overwhelming, like it was for Charlie. And so if an attorney doesn't have that kind of conversation with the client, and they don't want to because they can make so much more money by going to trial, then, in the end, the client is going to be the one stuck holding the bag and going to prison. The attorney isn't going to prison. So it's sort of the way the business world works in the criminal law arena.
Curious who asks, how much money has Donna and Charlie really spent on lawyers? When will they run out of money?
Well, they probably still have some millions available, and they will burn through, most all of this money by the time it's all said and done. And hopefully, they have rapid success prosecutions against Wendy and Harvey.
Jody Roser asks, what's more laughable, extortion and not calling the police? Just keep giving the money? Just dumb.
Right.
Yep.
Right. That's another thing you could have mocked Charlie on. Back to the other question, like, what could you ask him? It's like, you could just make this whole scenario be such a laughable thing. You could get the jury laughing about, really. So somebody tries to basically rob you and you don't call the police and you're afraid that they're going to, come after you and stuff like that. I mean, no wealthy person would believe that. No person on the jury would believe that. And so it's just, you could just have a lot of fun basically mocking him on cross-examination of how that he basically was extorted for life. I mean, what person would allow themselves to be extorted? Because who's to say it would stop after the $350,000 was paid for? They would keep on going for life. Well, nobody's going to do that. They're going to call the police. They're going to set up a sting operation, and they could have nailed these folks the first time they met to give the check, or they could have set up undercover cops to follow Katie when she went back to hand over the cash. They could have had the cash traced and whatnot. So there's any number of ways to catch the folks doing this. So anyway, it's just something that, like I say, they didn't do very well on the prosecution side, but they didn't have to at the other rate because Charlie sunk himself.
Debbie M. asked, do you think that the bump with Donna is the smoking gun the prosecution can use to highlight her part in the whole thing?
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the dynamite things that they did to be able to flesh out the guilty parties, and Donna being a vital key co-conspirator in this thing. And the telephone conversations that happened, those are so critical as well. So it wasn't just the bump and her reaction, but everything just reeks of guilt and how she and Charlie handled this situation.
Okay, next question from Sally A. Do you feel Wendy played Detective Isom when she was being interrogated? It seemed like she was the one running the interrogation, planting her seeds of other suspects.
Well, keep in mind, it's not an interrogation. And, interrogation is when they believe the person they're interviewing is the one that committed the crime, and they're trying to get them to confess. So Isom never did do anything to try to get Wendy to confess because he believed she was the perpetrator. In essence, he was just trying to find background information. And I think she quickly, in his mind, was ruled out as a suspect. And in doing so, I think on the other side of it, though, I think Wendy could pick up on that Isom wasn't being critical about her stories that she was telling and pointing the finger at other folks. For example, this what just came to mind was, when she said she didn't want to call Ruth and Phil, let them know what's going on. She said, because they're going to think I did it. I was like, wait a minute, why would they think you did it? He didn't follow up on stuff like that. So he left so many things undone. But in the end, just like with Charlie, the more she talks, the more you see her laughing and acting like this is not a big deal, the more you see that she wasn't wanting to dig into more details. Anybody looking over that interview would see that if they know anything about the case, they would see that definitely she had foreknowledge and probably culpability just on that interview alone.
Next question, Katie Girl. If Donna's trial and a new trial for Charlie are running simultaneously, could they each have to testify at each other's trial?
Well, it depends. If you're saying if it's a joint trial like that, there is a chance that folks do have to testify, not simultaneously, but that in front of the same courtroom have to testify the same. There could be different jurors, two different jury panels that would be hearing the evidence. But in the end, I think that as I've said before, if you don't have a joint trial, at least have rapid succession prosecutions, not this we're going to wait 10, 11 years or 14 or 15 or 20 years before you go after the other perpetrators.
Maya Rodriguez Sorensen, Esquire, do you think Donna's trial being derailed has basically derailed full justice for Dan? I don't see any movement on arresting the other culpable Adelsons.
Well, that's something. The thing that would make me believe that your assessment could be correct is the fact that that press conference that Jack Campbell had was basically very dismissive of the case in their derelictions and the way they botched this issue. And think about it. It was obvious that Jack Campbell didn't know the law, because he basically was saying that, there's nothing they could have done to thwart Donna having these conflicted counsel. When, I researched that issue, and the first thing that popped up was a Wheat versus United States case, the one that Judge Everett a couple weeks later cited, the first case he cited in his opinion. It's that easy to find out that Judge had that authority to remove all the Adelson lawyers, not just Rash Bomb. So the judge finally did the right thing, but I think the state's attorney's office, it's something that I think that they wish this whole thing could be buried and they could just duck and run. But I think in the end, the public pressure and this being their legacy, that is this going to be the office that was too afraid to go after the Adelsons, and so all the other convictions that he's touting and all the other crimes they're trying to solve, if they don't get the Adelsons, that's going to be a big albatross around their neck. So I think in the end, they're going to have to step up and do the right thing.
I hope so. Bonnie Ramirez, is there anything Charlie could have done to have gotten a lighter sentence?
Well, if you're going to cooperate, that's the best way to cut a deal. Look at Luis Rivera. He got the best deal. He only had to serve 19 years, and 15 of the 19 he's already served in the federal system. So flipping is always the best thing you can do on other co-conspirators, especially. I've had clients where they, in order to get them a better deal, I'll tell them, do you know of any other crimes you can report? Do you know any crimes other folks have committed that you're aware of, and whether you participate or not, help solve it, help get a better deal? And so that's worked to their advantage. So it's sort of like defense counsel can help solve crimes that the police don't even know about, if they pursue that type of work with interviewing their clients.
Next question from Robin Luan. Would Magbanua get a reduced sentence for her testimony, and does that make her a proffer? That's a good question. So let's say she testifies in the next 2 to 3 trials of the Adelsons. At what point, if they cut a deal with her, would it be done? Would it be done after the last one, or?
There's no deal cutting. Once you're convicted, there's no, oh, hey, let's reduce your sentence down, shave 20 years off. The avenue, just like in the federal system, is the court has discretion based on what's proffered and explained to how much substantial assistance they provided to help solve other crimes. And basically they can, depart from the mandatory minimum. So that'd be the same kind of thing that I've had a client, for example, that I had triple convictions for drug distribution, being charged in federal court, and he was looking at life without parole. And the only way he was able to get a sentence shaved down to 20 some years was substantial assistance. So that was something that, was able to do an override on the mandatory minimum. So that's something that is out there. So she's not going to cut a deal for set terms. What she's going to have to do is keep testifying truthfully every time she's called. And that will be something that the states will say, well, she played, somewhat of an important role, not the most critical witness to the case, but, we're amenable to her having a certain percentage of time cut off if they make a recommendation to the court. And then it's up to the court to decide.
For those new to the case, this might be a good question. I never heard about, how did they know Wendy drove by the house that day? Did someone recognize her car?
Well, there was the law enforcement officers that recognized a van similar to Wendy's. She had a tan Honda Odyssey, which is a minivan of sorts, and there wasn't a lot of traffic on that road. It's not a heavily traveled road. It's not a main thoroughfare for folks to get to that side of town. So it's really a residential area. John and me have been there, and it's got speed bumps, a lot of foliage. It's like the last place you'd want to take to use a shortcut to get across town in that general area. So they also had the cell phone tracking system to follow her. She also mentioned, that she had gone down Truscott, and her testimonies changed a whole lot. Excuse me. So, her latest court testimony is that she never drove down Truscott. That was blocked off there where Truscott starts. And so the distance of travel you're talking about, probably, I think it's over a mile that she says she never drove on when she initially said she has. So her testimony is all over the map. And so we do know and have confirmation from a number of sources that prove she actually did drive down Truscott, just like basically a house away from where Dan Markell was gunned down.
And Carl, when the police officer was testifying at Charlie's last trial about seeing her car pull up, and that he was asked, well, how do you recognize this car? He said, well, I have one in my own family. I looked at the jurors, and every single juror's head went down to their notepad. That was such a riveting indicator of guilt to me all along. And sure enough, the jurors all took note of that wow. In their mind, in my opinion, they realized, wow, she was there at the scene. She showed up afterwards.
Yeah. And like Charlie was saying, his own buddy in Minneapolis said, it's what is it, Charlie? 1 in a million odds. He showed up right after the murder happens as like a crime scene inspection to make sure the job was done.
Jenna says, is it true that one of Donna's new lawyers was the probate lawyer for Dan Markell?
That's what I'm hearing. And like I've said earlier, if that was the case, it just looks really bad. I don't think there's anything that's a conflict per se, but being the named probate judge, if that is indeed the case, and then you become the defense counsel for someone that murdered that family member of the Markells, that just looks really bad.
Linda Mon asks, at what point do the feds step in and do something in this murder case?
Well, we have that heavy Fed involvement with Special Agent Sanford, but we don't see any movement or interest from the federal attorney's office there, U.S. Attorney's office that's there in Tallahassee. So in the end, I think we're probably not going to see the feds involved in that more in terms of like arresting and prosecuting. I think it's going to have to be up to Jack Campbell. And hopefully he's going to do the right thing here.
So Deb H says, I'm sick with the corruption and cover-ups for the criminals in Florida. The excuses made, the slow roll of the justice system.
Right. I agree with that.
I have wondered if she, Wendy, wanted to be the one to discover that Dan was shot.
That's something that could be very possible as well. I think you'd have some folks on the jury that think that she was there to actually see it happen. Who knows? Maybe she's going to be there and oh my gosh, what happened to you? Dan, what are you doing in your garage? Oh my gosh, and call 911 herself. So who knows? Or if she just driven by and just kept on driving. If she saw some some kind of situation that Dan was in.
C-Love says the Adelson's connections have been working to have this outcome this entire time.
I think connections worked initially for a number of years, but I think those connections have pretty much dried up. I think it comes down to some of the other things I've talked about the state's attorney's office.
Tic Tac asks, how long do the victims get help from the court?
Well, there's supposed to be, there's victims' rights in any state and also in the federal system that basically require some rudimentary things like notices and stuff like that. Some kind of things can be reimbursed, like if they're subpoenaed, they can be reimbursed for travel and court costs and things of that nature. So the Markells probably have their trips to court paid for if they're called as a witness. But if, like, for example, if only Phil's going to testify, they're not going to pay for Ruth to come down there and testify unless there's some kind of victim assistance funding separately they could pursue. But in the end, look how many trips that they're having to make from Canada down. And so far, it's not looking good that Charlie's conviction is going to stick.
Next question by Miriam Komiji. Sorry about me butchering your name. Why do you think that the prosecution is so reluctant to prosecute Wendy and seemingly thinks that they need her to testify? And I've heard other channels say that. Well, they can't arrest her yet because they need her to testify in the other trials. Couldn't a detective testify to the same thing that she does?
Well, I think with Wendy, you could, if you charge Wendy, and you could still order her to testify. If she doesn't cooperate, then she could be held in contempt. So that could be added on top of whatever she's convicted for. But even if you thought, well, she's not going to cooperate, she's already in pretrial and not going to be released. So why don't we just wait until she's actually, she's actually done testifying against other family members? But she's not that critical of a witness per se, because what's happening is she doesn't admit to anything. So really the incriminating stuff is what she's lying about, like where she went and all that kind of stuff. And if you just look at the way the litigation was happening between Dan and her, and how she was being really facing some harsh scrutiny in court with regard to the motions that Dan had filed. I mean, she was looking at, I would say within 6 months, she probably was not going to be working there. She would have been fired from FSU Law School, and she would have had troubles with the state bar. So those kind of things really made it pressing for her to sign off on this deal. And think about it. She got to skate out of town for free. She had no visitation, the rights to maintain the residence of the boys down there in South Beach. So it was a complete windfall for her. She was a major benefactor for this. Windfalls and monetary funding as well. So everything looked like this was had her DNA all over it. So in the end, I would say that I cannot believe that she's not going to be prosecuted for this. I just do not believe that's even remotely possible. I do believe that she isn't listed as an unindicted co-conspirator. So even shows like 2020 and stuff like that, they don't even talk to her about her as being an unindicted co-conspirator. So a lot of stuff is just not covered enough detail by the state attorney's office. But I think in the end, they may be afraid of trying a circumstantial case like that. Donna's case is very circumstantial, but you get conviction with circumstantial evidence there because the indicators leave no doubt in your mind, but that the person was involved in the murder.
All right, so put you on the hot seat, Carl. When do you think, because of course things have changed, and Carl's been saying for a long time that there'll be a lot of twists and turns in this case, and my gosh, have there been. Mm-hmm. So today, in October 26th, 2024, when do you think Wendy will be arrested, or is she going to be arrested at all?
I do think she'll be arrested. I think the state attorney's office is just right now trying to hunker down, and I think they're so afraid of what's going to happen, or they should be afraid of what's going to happen in Charlie's case, that maybe they'll decide not to try another Adelson. Because think about it, if they can't even get the convictions done on Charlie and Donna, maybe they feel they're not competent enough to pursue any other Adelson. So that's probably the biggest impediment. So in the end, I think she will be, but I think they're going to have to wait until Donna and Charlie get convicted. So you're talking about maybe, 5-6 years down the road before they arrest Wendy, which is really abysmal excuse for justice.
Ellie asks, would there be any advantage if Wendy comes to trial to adding some witnesses such as the Geek Squad tech or a representative from the moving company when Wendy fled Tallahassee?
Yeah, I think the Geek Squad guy would be helpful to shock about the details of what are you doing there 45 minutes? What was occupying your time? She had to talk to Charlie for like 18 minutes or so while the Geek Squad guy's still there. So it looks like it was so much an issue of, from what I saw in the police report, that there was a stall tactic being done by Wendy that, that is helpful information. So, but in the end, I guess it's still a slam dunk. They didn't need that evidence for Charlie, but that's the kind of stuff I definitely use for Wendy's prosecution.
Sally A. asked, John, you had my question up and didn't ask Carl it. Carl, do you think Wendy's friends might testify against her now that they know that they were played by Wendy?
Well, I wouldn't say all of them know that, but I think there's certain ones that I do think there is that potential that could definitely help the prosecution. And one of the things, though, the prosecutor office needs to do is actually knock on doors and interview people. So don't wait for them to come to you. And so it's something that the prosecution's office should be flushing out all these kind of details. And but in the end, it doesn't look like they have that much energy and focus.
Lisa asked, do you think when they do arrest Wendy, the boys will stay with the Markells? I sure hope so.
I do, and that's an issue though. There, because the Markells are out of the country and whatnot, it remains to be seen how that would be processed. That's in the state Child Protective Services type equivalent office that would handle that. 2 more questions, John.
Okay.
I'm starting to get a scratchy voice here. I don't know what's going on.
Bugs Bunny asked, Carl, if this was a death penalty case, would there have been more scrutiny?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things, they initially tried the first 2, Sigfredo and Katie with the death penalty. And because they didn't get a death penalty against Sigfredo, I mean, they automatically decide not to go against Adelson's with the death penalty. But I think if you do the death penalty, it totally is a game changer because folks, granted, it's more expensive and there's more hoops you got to jump through from a legal perspective. But in the end, I think you got more leverage the more you come in there with the big guns looking to gun down a defendant who's responsible for a murder.
And we'll take this, Carl, as a last comment.
All right.
It's a comment more of a question. I find this to be, and she's a lawyer, the most frustrating case because if the lack of justice for Dan, a Harvard-educated law professor, can be murdered in cold blood without full accountability, it can happen to us.
Right. I mean, it's just really appalling to see. I think that for someone that talked about the law, preached the law, was recognized, and did so many honorable things to support the instruction of other law students, for him to basically just be sort of like not a big deal that he was gunned down in his garage is shocking, and it does pose, in essence, a risk that any of us could be in the same scenario. And so, you think of law enforcement, they're to protect and serve the community, but here, whatever the law enforcement has done, you haven't had the backing from the lawyers. So you can have the greatest police force in the world, but if you don't have tough, courageous, hard-nosed cops being backed up by equally tough, hard-nosed, and zealous prosecutors, they're left holding the bag. And so I think I can tell that folks down there in law enforcement are frustrated by this. I think they realize that, there's this a dropping of the ball, repeated dropping the ball by the state attorney's office. So I just hope in the end here that the continued coverage of this case is not going to go away. I think the national coverage from national media will help focus this, but they don't cover the case enough details when they do these reportings. And anyway, they have some folks on there that were, bashing Dan as well. So is this really terrible coverage? I don't even watch it. I've just heard that, by the way. So from folks that closely watch that and follow this case. So in the end, I don't think that that's beneficial, but any kind of exposure like that to show this thing is going on for so many years, I think is beneficial. So this is the most bizarre case you'll find probably in true crime because you got so many characters that have issues that are preventing justice for Markel. So like I say, the issues that I've covered on this channel with you cover anything in the gamut from what the judge isn't doing right to what the defense attorneys aren't doing right, what state attorney's office isn't doing, on down the line of into specific evidentiary matters as well. So in the end, let's just keep focusing on this and bring these kind of details to light because we'll probably have many years of coverage on this case. And unfortunately, I wish we could say we can move on from the Markel case because justice has been done, and I see that there's successful prosecutions that don't have any chance on appeal, but that doesn't look like the case so far yet. But they just got to keep the heat against these guys, the prosecution, from letting their foot off the gas. They need to step it up, definitely.
So in the meantime, because we agree there's going to be a long delay until the next Adelson trial, Carl and I will be covering the murder of Jared Brightigan, which was also in Florida. It was very similar circumstances to this one. It's a lot easier to understand and digest. So just giving you a heads up on that. I plan on being there, boots on the ground, and tapping into their live feed if the court allows me to. And also in this case, I will be there, boots on the ground. I plan on dropping my vacation at work to be able to attend all future, hopefully 4 trials of Adelson's, and have Carl's accompanying commentary live. So that's the future. Hopefully it happens sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us. So we're all for justice for Dan and his boys, the family, and the loved ones of Dan. It was an outrage. It was an injustice, and we're going to be stick around, Carl and I, until the last guilty Adelson is in jail. Thanks a lot for.
Hold it. One other thing, though, I did want to compliment John for buying me some new equipment here for the channel. It's really high-speed, awesome equipment, from a new different type of mic to a new camera and all kinds of new accessories for that. So this will be more of like a travel mode type thing that I can use in my various travels. So thanks, John, for that as part of your wedding gift. So I appreciate that.
And congratulations on your marriage to Leslie. Carl is now married, and he met. He doesn't like me saying this, but we have to confess, and she's sitting right there. But think about it: the tragedy of the murder of Dan Markell. And I've talked to Dan's dad about this, Phil. It's like, look, isn't it amazing how you can have such a tragedy in life, but you still have blossoms, you still have things that happen that are beneficial. Look at the positive nature of just that incident alone. Think of all the people that we've met, Carl, you and I in this case. There are connections now to people in this case that are closely attached to the case. So it's just amazing. You have to look for the silver linings in life. I'm a big believer in that, and I'm really excited for Carl and Leslie. Congratulations to them both. And I'm going to be I took some pictures of Carl and Leslie.
No.
Yes, and I'm going to be posting one on my trip in the next few days. So if you guys want to know what Leslie looks like, she's very sweet, by the way. And I'm really excited that they met through this case, and I'll be posting that soon. But Carl doesn't get a choice in the matter of what picture picture I post. So thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you on the next live stream.
Take care. Have a good night. Be safe.
Perfect.
And thank you, our executive producer.